Hello there. Today I'm looking at a red wine from northeastern Italy. So the one I have here is from a producer called Pieropan. This is their Ruberpan Valpollicella Superiore 2021. So the brand name Ruberpan, a combination of the Latin expression ruber meaning red with the second half of the family name, hence Ruberpan. The concept is that this is a modern Valpolicella with a nod to history, showcasing the character of the region and yet incorporating Pieropan's signature precision in their winemaking. Pieropan is a wine producer from northeast Italy and the wine producing region of Veneto. For generations, this producer has dedicated itself to the making of Soave Classico, for which they're justly famous, having been the first people to bottle a wine labelled as Soave back in the 1930s. But more recently, the company's expanded its winemaking expertise to encompass the Valpolicella region. So they trace their origins back to the 19th century, where in the village of Soave, Leonildo Pieropan established his estate at Palazzo Pullici, and since then the responsibility for running the estate has fallen to various generations of the same family. Principally, they now have 3 organically farmed vineyards: Calvarino, La Rocca and Garzon. So they have 58 hectares of vineyards in the Soave region, and the Calvarino vineyard is probably the jewel in their crown. They've owned it since 1901. It's a very steep vineyard with wonderful old terraces. They also make a sweet Reciotto di Soave from Garganega grown in the Soave Classico region. They bottle a sparkling rosé made from Corvina, and like many Italian estates, make their own extra virgin olive oil. In 1999, however, Pieropan acquired an uncultivated plot of land on the slopes of the Monte Garzon hillside in the Valpolicella region. And the limestone and clay soils that they found here were planted to several typical Valpolicella varieties. We have Corvina, Corvinone, Rondinella, and the possibly less well-known Reciotto della. And today they have 8 hectares of relatively mature vines in the Valpolicella region. In addition to the vineyards, a winery was constructed here in 2005 at Villa Cipolla Pieropan in Tregnago. This winery being built specially to produce the Valpolicella Superiore and an Amarone della Valpolicella. The vineyard is at Soave Classico in the Val di Lasse. The vineyard sits at an altitude between 300 and 500 metres above sea level, and the site has a southern exposure. The soils are predominantly pink limestone soils, so you have a mixture of clay and chalk soils here. The vineyards are entirely organic and the average vine age is about 20 years. Planting is at a density of 5,800 vines per hectare, and the yield per hectare is between 40 and 50 hectolitres per hectare, and they say that's the equivalent of about 1 to 1.5 kilograms of fruit coming off each vine. The grapes were all hand-picked at arrival at the winery. They were destemmed and crushed. Fermentation took place in stainless steel tanks, and temperature was kept relatively low at 23 to 24 degrees Celsius, with maceration going on for 12 days. During that period, they were regularly punching the cap of skins back down into the fermenting must to give control over the delicate extraction of tannins and colours into the wine. The wine then aged for between 18 and 24 months in French oak tonneau, and of those tonneau, about 40 to 50% were new, which seems a relatively high percentage. The wine is bottled with as little intervention at this stage as possible, so it's completely unfiltered. And the final blend was a combination of 60% of Corvina, 30% of Corvinone, 5% of Rondinella, and 5% of Reciotto Veronese. Once bottled, the wine was kept back at the producer's cellars for a couple of months prior to release, just to allow the different elements within the wine to fully marry. Now, taking a look at some notes I saw, one retailer was suggesting that this was a wine whose drinking window was between 2025 and 2035, and that struck me as being quite ambitious for a Valpolicella, even a Superiore. So I'll be interested to see if this is a wine with sufficient concentration seemingly to last for that period of time. So let's take a look at it, shall we? First thing that is really quite obvious is that the wine is of a medium depth of colour. It's quite a vibrant ruby red, but I can easily see through it. I have no difficulty seeing the stem of the glass there. Swirling it, this is a wine that has 14% alcohol. Again, surprisingly high for a Valpolicella. Look looking to see if it's going to create any tears on the side of the glass there. And really, it's not clinging particularly to the glass. So that's suggesting to me that it doesn't have a huge structure. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? Those aromas really are quite high-toned and perhaps a little old-fashioned. There really is an initial note of bitter cherry, but there are hints of earth, perhaps touches of spice, and mellow savoury notes, all surrounded by bright fruit and some lifted floral notes. And that lifted nature is almost giving a peppery aspect to the aromas. So let's have a taste. On the palate, the wine is of course completely dry, but actually what's quite surprising is its astringency. There is a very fine tannin that is interacting with some good fresh acidity. It's quite developed, almost slightly meaty, slightly anise note, overlaying some really quite juicy, bright red cherry fruit. Again, it's that distinct bitterness that's combining with the cherry fruit, and that's giving a wonderful mouth-watering nature to the wine. So coming to what I'm thinking about the wine's ability to age, on the palate there's certainly a good structure. I think some of that may be derived from the oak. I am just starting to see touches of sweet spice and cedar on the mid palate, but throughout the whole thing there's a juiciness, perhaps some touches of cranberries and red currant. And yet at the centre of it all, there's also a distinct concentration of anise fruit. The alcohol doesn't particularly stand out, but as I look for it, I do find there's a warmth, and that's giving some mellowness to the back palate. It's helping to lift those high-toned notes. The bitter cherry notes are continuing, but there's almost a mellow stewed plum touch to the back palate. The freshness continues, and it's giving a good long finish to the wine. This was a wine I was interested to try because Pieropan are such good Soave producers. I wanted to see how they could turn their hand to Valpolicella, and this wine really is a very good example of what Valpolicella can achieve. It's not a big, huge wine, it's probably at best medium-bodied. There's an elegance of fine tannin, there's good acidity, there's lively fruit, and while there are some quite notable oak notes to it, it's certainly not being dominated by oak. In some ways there's quite a traditional style. The structure, the spicy notes, the slightly earthy notes on the aromas all point to a much more rustic style, and yet the fruit has a purity and a depth that's very impressive. With regard to whether the wine is suited for staying in your cellar for another 10 years, I think it's reasonable to expect it would do that. It's got good acidity, there's a very fine structure, and in fact a drinking window I saw said from 2025 to 2035. I think it would benefit this wine to be left for another couple of years just to gain a little bit more softness and roundness on the mid palate. When I looked at the Wine Searcher website, there is a critic score for the 2021 vintage, and I'm a little surprised to see that it only got 88 out of 100. Because this is a nicely balanced wine, it's got good concentration, and it does seem to have that precision I was talking about earlier that Pieropan are so well known for in their white wines. Given that, I certainly think this is a wine that's worth at least 90 out of 100. I found it an impressive wine, and I enjoy the way it appears to be a modern interpretation of this style of wine, whilst respecting the traditions and upholding the typical character of wines from this region. So thank you so much for joining me. I do hope you've enjoyed this tasting. If you have, do please press the like button, that would be very much appreciated. If you'd like to watch more of these tastings, do please subscribe to my YouTube channel, sign up, make sure you set yourself an alert, and that way you can be notified every time I publish a new video. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, please do pass it on to them or tell them where to find it. That kind of endorsement from you is absolutely invaluable and very much appreciated. I will of course leave a link in the notes below to the webpage for this vintage of this wine on the Wine Searcher website, so you can go and look for that if you like, see if you can find it in your market and see at what price it is. So thank you once again for joining me, and I do hope, if you can, you'll make some time in the near future and come and join me on my channel and watch another video tasting. Till then, bye for now.